All right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio. Now, today, I knew I was going to do an upload on O.J. Simpson because that's the stuff that I've been going over recently. However, I didn't exactly know how I was going to go about it. At first, I thought about talking about some alternative theories. We do a segment on this channel where that's like Devil's Advocate, where you sort of play the Devil's Advocate about, what would it be if it were this particular circumstance? And I thought about doing one like, what would it be like if O.J. Simpson were innocent? Let's play the Devil's Advocate there. Then I thought that would just like, I don't know, I just had this really kind of creepy feeling about it. I've talked about other murderers, alleged murderers, I should say, being innocent, but I didn't really want to go down that road. I've done multiple uploads on the channel about the Jason Simpson murder theory, and also I've really been going over things about the drug connections associated with the O.J. Simpson case, stuff that wasn't really reported that much back in 1994, 95, 96. We're talking about the connections at the restaurant La Mezzaluna, where Ron Goldman, the victim that was murdered, worked as a waiter. And of course, Nicole Brown Simpson attended La Mezzaluna frequently, as well as attending the night that she was murdered, leaving her glasses there. I just didn't know what angle to go from. So I think we're going to have to talk about everything. We just have to just launch everything all at once. The things that I've been reviewing about the O.J. Simpson case began with my most recent upload on this, when I talked about the theory that O.J. Simpson had an accomplice with the murders, meaning that this was not the work of one person. This is actually the work of at least two people, maybe three. I mean, there could be multiple assailants involved with the O.J. Simpson case, and only O.J. was arrested. And let's look at some of the things that are in favor of that. There's an individual named Norman Pardo, and he put out an enormous amount of statements saying that he was O.J. Simpson's manager for a very long time, and he has some definitive evidence saying that there was a second individual involved, that there was an accomplice. He's all over Google, all over the news circuits. If you put in O.J. Simpson and an accomplice into Google, that's pretty much all you get is Norman Pardo. However, the thing that I really focused in the most on was the concept of Ron Goldman showed very large signs of a struggle on his body. His hands were torn up from striking a person in combat, so we believe. Yet OJ had no major wounds to his face, and I believe that this is true, that he was photographed like completely, like his body was photographed, like his chest, his abdomen, his back were all photographed when he was arrested by the police. I believe that's correct, but I couldn't find the exact source that I saw that from. But it's one of those things that you saw years ago. But definitely did not sustain any major wounds that were reported by anyone. However, though, in the people who think that if I'm going to be talking about an accomplice, that I'm going to be bringing up OJ's oldest son, Jason Simpson, he also did not have any major facial wounds or any major bodily trauma that's visible. We have media of Jason Simpson running out to the White Bronco at the Rockingham estate, as well as we have media of Jason in a deposition with lawyers, not showing any sort of blows to the face and any, no black eye, no cuts on the lips that anyone asked him about or anything like that. Okay, well, then what happened? What's the heart and soul of this accomplice theory? There was another individual involved. And guess what? O.J. Simpson talks about this very clearly in the book, If I Did It, the Judith Regan interview, all of those things. He says that there's an individual named Charlie that was present at the crime scene. And Charlie, like, he doesn't say too much about him. It's more like the people on the internet, in the threads, as well as almost all the commentators, and I was listening to some other podcasts, they all think that O.J. Simpson is just using Charlie as a name for his alter ego. Like, one of them sort of kind of said what I thought was going to happen. They're talking about this guy named Charlie. It's like, well, if it's O.J., is Charlie just the name that he's giving to his dark side? Is this just the way a person is psychologically dealing with the issue? Like, he just is calling his kind of dark personality Charlie. No, I didn't commit the murder. Charlie did. No, actually, what a lot of the kind of more thorough articles were saying is that he's referring to his conscience as Charlie. You know, like Charlie's holding the knife, and then he says he took the knife from Charlie, and then he stabbed Nicole. Well, that means sort of like Charlie was the person, who was well, Charlie, his conscience, his introspection, his the person keeping him sane. All the descriptions in the book about Charlie are just very mild, very gentle. They're trying to keep OJ calm, but OJ is actually the dark side. O.J. Simpson is the dark side. Charlie is once again the conscience. That's kind of the thing that the commentators have really tried to pull out. And I think one of the big reasons for that is they believe that, well, if I mean, the elephant in the room is then the media would have gotten it wrong. All of these news networks in the 1990s would have gotten it wrong. They would have been completely wrong about the story, that there would have been an accomplice. On the absolute most personal level, because on this channel I don't ever really hold back my personal theories, I'd say that there's a range of possibilities with the accomplice theory in O.J. Simpson, meaning that there is someone who has been involved with the murders of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman who was never held accountable. This could be a getaway driver, or what I've been thinking about today was that Ron Goldman got into a serious fight with somebody. I mean, you can see the photos of his hands. He has serious damage on his knuckles. One thing that I had thought about that was that he could have possibly been punching or scraping his hands along the ground as OJ was holding him down. But the thing is, we can also use the Master Yoda logic and say if OJ has no major wounds on his body, yet Ron Goldman was most likely punching someone, well, then there was someone else there present. And the theory that I was going to put forward was OJ got physical with Nicole and used the knife, and this Charlie person, whoever he was, is a real person, and he got into the physical altercation with Ron Goldman. And he was the one who was, fighting Ron. Whereas remember, Ron Goldman was a black belt in karate, and he has such obvious, visible signs of fighting someone, like a very, very strong fight for his life, or on his body. There were all kinds of defensive wounds and very, very beaten up knuckles. So that tells me that he was fighting someone. OJ doesn't have these type of wounds on his body. That probably means that he was fighting somebody else. And I don't believe for a second that the cut on OJ's hand caused all the damage on Ron Goldman's body, which other people have drawn attention to. Okay, so this is the accomplice theory playing out. Somebody else was fighting Ron Goldman, and then OJ comes at Ron with the knife, and he, of course, delivers the fatal blows with the knife, or like I guess you'd say the stabbings. They did an animation reenactment of the fight on YouTube. You can see it actually. But the thing is that it was actually just horrible. It's like they showed just Ron Goldman pretty much falling over, and like OJ just kind of pushes him and he just falls down, and then oh, he's dead. The only thing I would say that this animation reenactment actually contributed was it shows that OJ probably lost his knit cap, and then he is kind of moving around looking for it, and then he had to remove his glove to feel around on the ground because it's so dark he can't see the black knit cap, and then they just panic and they get it out of there. Now, there's an individual out there named Jeffrey Toobin, and he was writing for CNN, and he is trying to dispel all of the accomplice theories that I've talked about how somebody got into a physical altercation with Ron, and then OJ came at Ron with a knife. And then, of course, that other person would, of course, served as the getaway driver. Why does Jeffrey Toobin say that there's no possible way that there could be an accomplice? He just says there's no physical evidence of it. There is no definitive physical evidence that places anybody at the crime scene, no bloody footprints, no blood DNA, none of those things place a fourth person at this crime scene. And I do have to confess, very little physical evidence, but once again, if the theory that I put forward is true, that somebody got into a physical altercation with Ron, and he could be quite a bit. There could be quite a bit of distance between him and Nicole at that time, and the fact of the matter is, it's possible to go through a crime scene without leaving bloody footprints. I mean, we've covered cases on this channel like that, especially the disappearance of Joan Risch from like 1961, and that is one of the anomalies of that case. It's a very bloody crime scene, but there are no footprints, and people think that that's strange. It is possible. Not to mention, if OJ stabbed Ron and not this Charlie, whoever he is, then Ron wouldn't have experienced the type of profuse bleeding that would have increased the likelihood of leaving footprints, which of course OJ did leave behind with the Bruno Mali shoes. It's like OJ in one part of his 1996 interview says that he says that if he had been wearing the Bruno Mali shoes, he would have tracked blood home because they have, those really kind of deep ridges or maybe crevices. I mean, I'm not sure the exact word he used, but then if he had been at the crime scene and stepped in the blood, then there would have been like all types of blood particles going up and down his staircase and in his driveway. Okay, he's saying that, right? He's trying to prove his innocence. In the civil trial, he said he never owned the Bruno Mali shoes. He said he never owned them. He would never be caught. He blatantly lied about that one. As you can see, I mean, I guess I'm going down the theory that OJ was involved with this. OJ was the murderer. And somebody posted in the comments section on one video when they said that there's a movement of OJ truthers out there, and that is so true. It is so blatant. It's like there are an enormous amount of people who don't believe that OJ Simpson was the murderer. And OJ gives a lot of interviews on the subject. He talks a lot about why he believes the evidence suggests that he was not the murderer. I just gave a theory that I put forward that either he had a getaway driver or that he had somebody assaulted Rob, who kind of admit, though, there is not that much physical evidence to support it. However, I would say that there's really not going to be that much. I mean, there's probably just not going to be that much physical evidence left behind anyway if it plays out in the way that we just described. Alternative theories. Where are they coming from? Where is, like, what are they all about? Well, they really center around the restaurant La Mezzaluna in Brentwood, California. And like we mentioned, Nicole Brown. During the back when I was following this case in 2011, everyone was talking about how she was even described as his girlfriend. Now people are kind of changing the narrative. I mean, people are talking about her in a different way. I mean, they describe time, and we'll talk about that in a second because the time of death is very important. But the big thing to say is that now they're really saying Ron Goldman was not just her boyfriend or someone she was sleeping with, someone she was dating. They're saying that Ron was her drug dealer, and it seems like La Mezzaluna is very heavily connected in the drug circuit, and that's actually one of the arguments that OJ puts forward about who the killers. He says the killers. I mean, if you want to go down that road, he says that they were associated with the drug connections at La Mezzaluna, and he was talking about this during the interview he did on Up Close. That's the name of the show with Chris Myers, which is an ESPN show. Um, I used to watch Up Close back in the day, but I don't remember Chris Myers hosting it. Oh, what was the guy's name? Gary Miller or something, but I digress from that. Anyway, what does this have to do with anything? Well, La Mezzaluna was heavily involved with the drug trade, heavily involved with violence. Multiple waiters at La Mezzaluna um, received unfortunate deaths. One of them was named Michael Nigg, 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 and he was someone who was murdered by. He was shot, not stabbed, but he was shot, and he also had connections to the La Mezzaluna restaurant in Aspen, Colorado. There were at least two locations. Now, what does this have to do with the murder of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman? They're trying to say is that they're individuals who got caught up in the drug trade. They got caught up in dealing with a very risky line of work, and it led to an untimely death. And they say that Ron Goldman was involved with that. Not only Nicole Brown, but also her friend Faye Resnick. Faye Resnick was someone who went to rehab just days prior to the death of Nicole Brown Simpson, and OJ's theories that he puts out in the interviews are all centered around Faye Resnick. He says that it was some of her bad connections rubbed off on Nicole Brown, And there's also something going out there that Ron Goldman had two friends that were both executed by having their throats slit. In short, very problematic, high risk environment that's going on here. And we really do have to note that about Nicole Brown Simpson. It's like she had an abusive ex husband who was stalking her, which I mean, a lot of parties just completely agree. OJ was indeed stalking Nicole, as well as we were having um, lots of her friends are involved in the drug trade. Not to mention, I mean, it's just all of these things are coming together at once, and I'm not really sure, but it's almost like if O.J. Simpson didn't kill Nicole Brown, someone from the drug trade at La Mezzaluna probably would. Her days were numbered. It's just, I mean, like, talk about attracting destruction in your life. It's either going out by, someone who could be some type of narcissistic sociopath or someone who could be affiliated with the drug lords. It's like she was in a very problematic position, and that goes without saying because she met an untimely demise. There are some other things, though, because a lot of things we've talked about so far are the kind of more well known things associated with the O.J. Simpson case. When we want to look at the untold stories, I was going through some articles today and I found one that was an interview with George Stephanopoulos. And oh, the guy that he is interviewing, I want to say his name is Henry Johnson. I hope I'm remembering that correctly. And this was a transcript that I was able to read. And he says that one of the alternative theories is that OJ couldn't have possibly killed Nicole and Ron because he was. There's actually a phone call that was made from Nicole Brown Simpson to her mother at 11 p.m. at night. And then he's saying that Nicole Brown must have been murdered around midnight. And well, that would kind of really change things because O.J. Simpson was in the limo already at 11 o'clock going from his house to the airport, to get his flight to Chicago. That stuff's all very well documented. If that phone call does indeed exist, well, that would kind of, it would maybe exonerate O.J., maybe. And O.J. Simpson actually filed a lawsuit against the phone company, like to have them reveal these records. And I don't know if it's exactly a lawsuit, but like he took legal action to get the phone company to reveal the records to see if Nicole had made that phone call at 11 p.m. But the thing is, the judge dismissed it and just said this is a frivolous case. We don't want anything to do with that. And once again, I want to say the guy's name was Henry Johnson. It was an interview with George Stephanopoulos from ABC, and I mean, something like that. I mean, that is really quite puzzling. Like, I really wish the judge would have just gone along with that. I mean, what does he really have to lose? I mean, if anything, he could either exonerate OJ or he could actually kind of just put all of these alternative theories to rest. But at the same time, and I mean, the judge is probably not too concerned with what people are saying on the internet in terms of these, what if discussions that are going on. But I still thought that that was a very fascinating alternate theory. Like, and the time of death for Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman ranges from between 9:30 and usually 11 p.m. They say that it occurred somewhere in between that time. But the thing is, we don't necessarily know. I mean, if this story about Nicole's phone call is true, that would definitely change some things. I mentioned the series from the YouTube channel Lionel Nation, which talks a lot about the O.J. Simpson case. And they just say that this was O.J. alone. He has Nicole's blood in his Bronco, he has Ron Goldman's blood in his Bronco, and his own blood were all found in the Bronco. Why? Because he killed them. It's just like it was O.J. Simpson. He did it. The evidence couldn't have been planted because Mark Furman didn't know O.J.'s whereabouts. I mean, the police didn't know O.J.'s whereabouts, when they were examining the crime scene. And they didn't know that. I mean, I guess it's a little messy at that point. But anyway, the point is, though, the people who are insisting on O.J. evidence that the blood evidence was planted, that the glove was dropped. I mean, that the glove was dropped by the police. I should have finished that sentence. But at the same time, the people who are insisting that OJ is guilty are really trying to insinuate that there was only one perpetrator and, one person is involved with the violence. We do have an eyewitness who appeared in the documentary. What is it called? Is O.J. Innocent? The one that was produced by Martin Sheen. I'd always call it just the Martin Sheen miniseries, where they explored the William Deere theory about whether or not Jason Simpson, the oldest son of O.J. Simpson, was was the murderer, and O.J. covered up for him. Jason Simpson had a dispute with Nicole Brown. If she didn't have enough problems in her life, she also has a dispute going with Jason Simpson. He was a chef at a restaurant called Jackson's. I believe that's the name. I mean, I believe it's Jackson's. And I got a little mixed up like a lot of people. I've noticed people commenting and things on the internet saying that he worked at La Mezzaluna. And I also thought that he worked at La Mezzaluna, but no, he worked at a different restaurant. I was listening to my first upload on Jason Simpson, and I was listening to my own voice, and I was like, "Oh wow, yeah, I forgot about that. He worked at a different restaurant." Yeah, because the dispute that he had was Nicole Brown Simpson was supposed to come to his restaurant with 10 friends. There were going to be 11 people. Jason had reserved a table for them. They were going to, see where he worked and try his food, and they didn't show up that night. They just kind of didn't show up without any notice. So what happened was the William Deere theory is contingent that Jason Simpson went to Nicole's house to confront her about why she didn't come to his restaurant. So that led to the altercation, and well, you you can imagine the rest. That led to the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. One of the things that I've thought about could be the trigger for that. Like, this could have been the actual trigger about why O.J. Simpson would have gone over. I imagine something like a phone call from Jason to O.J. saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe Nicole did that to me." And like, I mean, I was waiting for her. I'm so mad. And then O.J. says, "Well, I'm gonna go over there and I'm gonna have some words with her." And then he goes with Charlie. Because I didn't buy the explanation at all in the Judith Regan interview when O.J. Simpson's like, Charlie comes to his house and just says, "Hey, there's something going down at Nicole's house. You got to get over there." I was like, that sounds kind of fabricated. I mean, and he says that Charlie is somebody that he doesn't know that well, but he was a recent friend, like a friend he had acquired recently. Now, in the Norman Pardo theories, the guy we mentioned at the beginning, Norman Pardo, OJ's ex manager, says there's a high possibility that OJ had two accomplices with him. He says at least one. So I've looked at the possibility that Jason Simpson could have been present, as well as Charlie, whoever he is. And because one of the things that William Deere has brought to our attention, if we're just going to take the William Deere theory and find some diamonds in the rough, it is that Jason Simpson had a dispute with Nicole Brown. He also would have had the capability to get there, because that's the thing that they tested out in the Martin Sheen miniseries. He would have had the possibility. He had the time to drive from, Jackson's to Nicole's residence. Like, the time frame all works out. And then we also have, just this is going to sound kind of weak, but during the verdict, when they say that Orenthal James Simpson is found not guilty, everyone, starts celebrating in the courtroom. Well, not Fred Goldman and Kim Goldman, but many people start celebrating. And then William Deere zooms in on Jason Simpson, and he just looks either angry, terrified, put off. And then what William Deere is trying to insinuate is that that is because Jason Simpson is like, "Oh wow, that the eyes are now going to come on to me. The investigation is now going to turn to me." And I don't necessarily think that Jason Simpson killed Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. I think that the Martin Sheen miniseries did a good job at using the blood evidence and the forensic evidence to reveal that this was most likely not the work of Jason Simpson. That Jason Simpson was not exactly the perpetrator in this particular event. However, that doesn't mean he wasn't involved. It could be that William Deere stumbled onto something, he just didn't get it in the exact format. Jason Simpson could have been an accomplice. He could have been also the person that called OJ, that initiated his encounter with Nicole that night. Like I said, I imagined a phone call from Jason to O.J. Simpson complaining that Nicole didn't show up at the restaurant. So O.J. and Charlie, who I'm I don't believe Charlie is AC either, Al Cowlings. I don't believe it's him. I don't believe it's Robert Kardashian. Um, I believe Charlie is. I'm not really sure who he is. Someone who's not been identified yet to the general public. And once again, though, we do have an eyewitness sighting of someone who saw O.J. Simpson in the white Bronco with an African American male, matching Jason Simpson's description on the night of the murder, who did not testify at the trial. But we do have that report, and that person did take a lie detector test and pass. And I know not everyone has a big stock in lie detectors, but at the same time, there it is. So that once again leads me down the path that O.J. Simpson committed these murders, but he had an accomplice. He had someone else attack Ron Goldman, and then O.J. finished Ron Goldman off with the knife. So I guess I'm talking not about what Robert Shapiro said, where he was like, multiple assailants, multiple knives. I'm not going down that road yet. What I'm saying is, there's probably one knife involved, but two perpetrators. OJ and this Charlie. I don't believe it's a metaphor for his alter ego. I don't believe it is a, just sort of name for his conscience. I don't believe it's a split personality or something like that. I'm suggesting that there were two people at the crime scene. However, I'm approaching this with an open mind. If I were ever to see any sort of new physical definitive evidence that this phone call that happened at 11 o'clock from Nicole Brown to her mother took place, I would be like, all right then. If we had anything more definitive about Ron Goldman's connections to La Mezzaluna and the drug trade, Nicole Brown's connections to La Mezzaluna and the drug trade, and it's like that place had a lot of murders. And when I said multiple people had died, we talked about Nig and Goldman, but also there were three other waiters from La Mezzaluna who disappeared, and they're just kind of like vanished, missing in action, missing persons cases. So very, very problematic establishment. Lots of problems going on there. And I guess we've kind of composed somewhat of a narrative of plausibility. Jason he calls O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson and his accomplice Charlie go on to Nicole Brown Simpson's house. They confront her. Things get heated. Ron Goldman shows up. They have a knife in the car because O.J. said he always had one in the car because it was easier than carrying a gun, and then that leads to the murders. Well, the only last thing to say about that is we'll keep an open mind if anything new happens, if there are any sort of new developments, but I admit that the physical evidence of this fourth person being at the crime scene is a little low, but I think that people are going to be talking about things like bloody footprints and um, fingerprints and stuff like that. Once again, I insist if the murders happen the way that I described, there wouldn't necessarily be bloody footprints, as well as, I mean, unless somebody's stepping in the soft earth, like on potting soil or something, there wouldn't be any footprints like that either. I'd say that it's possible. But we're going to see what happens. We're going to discuss things a little bit more, and let's talk next time.